The public is conditioned to watch the skies for incoming warheads. This is a fatal intelligence failure. The next systemic shock will not be a launch-on warning alert. It will be silence, a global dial tone. The adversary's blueprint is not a kinetic exchange. That is a solvency crisis they cannot afford. While U.S. conventional dominance is projected via MQ-4C Triton missions over the Caribbean and strategic posturing around Venezuela, the true battlefield is being ignored. An adversary facing unsustainable conventional losses, as CSIS documents in the European theater, does not de-escalate. It pivots to a domain where kinetic cost is irrelevant. The primary vector is not the missile. It is the severance of the planet's nervous system. The undersea fiber optic cables that carry over 99% of all transcontinental data and $10 trillion in daily financial transfers. The satellite constellations that provide the eyes, ears, and navigational certainty for every U.S. asset. The protocol is not to defeat the American military machine. The protocol is to make it deaf, dumb, and blind. To create a blind Leviathan, a superpower with unmatched firepower, rendered inert because it cannot see the target, cannot issue the command, and its economic foundations have been unplugged. This isn't a theory. It is the mathematical endpoint of asymmetric escalation. The motive is not a quest for glory. It is a solvency crisis. A nation-state, like a corporation, has a balance sheet. Its military is its primary operating expense. When that expense becomes unsustainable, the entire enterprise faces insolvency. The kinetic cost for Russia is no longer viable. Reports confirm Russian war deaths are at unsustainable levels, according to Al Jazeera data. This isn't just a military problem, it is a domestic liability. Each loss erodes political capital at home, turning the war from a foreign policy tool into a threat to regime stability. CSIS analysis confirms this trajectory. An unpopular war with hemorrhaging losses makes the current power structure insolvent. It cannot de-escalate. That is an admission of failure and invites collapse. It has no choice but to change the accounting. The pivot is not a choice. It is a mathematical imperative. When the cost of conventional kinetic warfare exceeds its returns, the state is forced to abandon that system and activate a new one, asymmetric warfare. The goal is to exit a game it is losing and create a new one where the cost-benefit analysis is inverted, a low-cost action that creates a high-cost problem for its adversary. Weakness forces this escalation. The core of this new protocol is a simple economic equation. Analysts at the Royal United Services Institute, or RUSI, place the kinetic cost of a modern main battle tank at approximately $5 million. The cost of the FPV drone that neutralizes it, $500. This is not warfare, it is an arbitrage of lethality. This 10,000 to 1 cost asymmetry renders conventional armored forces economically insolvent on the modern battlefield. An adversary doesn't need to match your strength, they only need to exploit your cost structure. This is the democratization of violence. The barrier to entry for projecting lethal force has collapsed from the nation-state level to the consumer electronic level. The operator requires no airbase, no billion-dollar training pipeline, just a controller. This economic reality is the accelerant. It forces powers facing unsustainable conventional losses, as reports on Russia indicate, to abandon the symmetric playbook. They cannot afford a solvency crisis where $5 million assets are liquidated by $500 threats. It coerces them up the escalation ladder into asymmetric vectors where the rules and the costs are rewritten entirely. The theater of conflict is not where the legacy media directs your attention. The primary battleground is the gray zone, transitional spaces used as laboratories for non-linear attack protocols. These are not sovereign territories in the classic sense. They are systemic vulnerabilities. The Caribbean is not about Venezuelan oil. It is a testbed for gauging U.S. response latency. The unsolicited seeds arriving in Texas are not agricultural curiosities. They are a low-cost, deniable probe of U.S. biosecurity and logistical chains. The evidence is documented. Publicly available flight tracking data confirms a U.S. Navy MQ-4C Triton, callsign BLK Cat-6, executing a 10-hour surveillance mission over the Caribbean. Simultaneously, U.S. Senate deliberations on war powers regarding Venezuela confirm a high-stakes conventional posture. This projection of overwhelming symmetric force is the accelerant. It creates a solvency crisis for adversaries, forcing them off the conventional chessboard entirely. This pressure forces the pivot to asymmetric vectors. The Texas Department of Agriculture documents the protocol in action. 101 packs of unsolicited seeds from China collected across 109 locations. This is not a kinetic attack. It is a distributed, low-cost exercise in mapping U.S. logistics from the inside. It tests customs, state-level response, and public compliance. Each seed packet is a data point on American institutional weakness. This blueprint is driven by a mathematical certainty. When a state's kinetic assets become insolvent, as Al Jazeera reports Russia's conventional losses are becoming unsustainable, it cannot de-escalate without capitulating. It must open a new front where its liabilities become its adversaries. Regional instability, whether in the Caribbean or reports from proxy labs like South Africa, are merely the staging grounds. They are the petri dishes where these new weapons, biological, economic, and radiological, are being calibrated before deployment against the primary target. The launch-on-warning doctrine is a systemic liability. It is a pre-authorized protocol for extinction, analyzed extensively by institutions like RUSI and CSIS. The logic is zero-sum. If a nation's early warning systems detect a full-scale incoming nuclear strike, it must launch its own retaliatory strike before its command structure and missile silos are turned to ash. There is no time for human deliberation. The launch decision is automated, a mathematical function of incoming data. This is where the protocol becomes a weapon against itself. An adversary facing a solvency crisis in conventional warfare, like Russia with its unsustainable kinetic losses, is incentivized to escalate asymmetrically. They do not need to fire a single missile. They only need to create the data of a missile launch. A sophisticated cyber attack can blind an opponent's radar network, or, worse, inject false positives, ghost signals of an attack that isn't happening. This creates the fog of digital war. The commander in the bunker sees his screens light up with hundreds of inbound threats. His communications are down. His satellites are dark. He is now forced to make a choice based on a single variable: fear. Does he wait for confirmation and risk total annihilation if the attack is real? Or does he execute the launch-on-warning protocol based on compromised data? The fear of a decapitation strike becomes the trigger. The adversary weaponizes the defender's own doctrine, forcing a launch out of paranoia. This is not a failure of the system. It is the system executing its function under asymmetric pressure. The protocol for a cornered state is not de-escalation. It is a solvency crisis. When conventional kinetic options become unsustainable, as they have for Russia, according to public assessments, the balance sheet of power projection is inverted. Liabilities must be converted into assets. This is not theory. It is a blueprint. The data is unambiguous. The U.S. Navy deploys the MQ-4C Triton for extended surveillance over the Caribbean, a direct projection of conventional dominance. Simultaneously, the Senate advances war powers measures related to Venezuela. This is an accelerant. It pressures adversaries out of the symmetric playbook. The response vector has already been tested. Texas authorities report collecting over 1,100 packets of unsolicited, mysterious seeds from China. This is not an agricultural prank. It is a low-cost, deniable probe of logistical and biosecurity response protocols, a test of the system's reaction time. CSIS analysts term this pre-conflict shaping. A system under kinetic pressure and facing a solvency crisis will escalate asymmetrically to re-establish leverage. The blueprint moves from the battlefield to critical infrastructure. The goal is not destruction, but the demonstration of capability, an event severe enough to demand attention, yet vague enough to ensure attribution is impossible. The calibration forecast. Within the next 12 months, expect a coordinated, multi-hour blackout targeting the Port of Miami's container terminal and adjacent data infrastructure. The event will be classified as a cascading grid failure, but it is a strategic signal, an attribution impossible calibration shot fired in the nonlinear war.